So I spilled coffee all over my notes when I was walking into my studio room, and now I can kind of make out some of the things I wrote in my spiritual notes and in my good notes.
Interesting.
I just have to read it very carefully.
It'll be like a word search.
Well, it's going to be one of those things where it's like, so what good things did you like in this? Well, Erica, something coming, ending. So that was really great stuff.
I really enjoyed that part.
Yeah, I mean, that cinched the whole thing for me. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another exciting episode of the Sanctum Sanctorum podcast where comics and Christ culture collide. I'm Chris.
And I'm the more magnanimous host, Joey.
You can't be more magnanimous than the already magnanimous host. That's not how the word works, as we discovered like 2 or 3 episodes ago.
And you brought it up in the last one, too. So I just wanted, it was my turn.
Oh, I didn't know that qualities of our personhood were things that we took turns on being.
It's all about competition, baby.
All right, well, that's fair.
Welcome to the show.
And also, we neglected to say this in our last episode because we were so excited to have Mike Perna of Inroads Ministries on.
Yep.
But happy Halloween season.
Happy Halloween.
So we are, for the month of October, we are going to be covering comic book movies that lean a little more into the dark side of comic books, the spooky side of comic books.
Into the scary.
Okay, great.
Well,
but I love, this is one of my favorite seasons and one of my favorite holidays. So I am excited to do some spooky movies and some Halloweeny kind of stuff. You guys got big Halloween plans over at your joint?
we usually are home base because we live in the town that you used to live in. And it's an incredible town. It's 1 mile squared. And so there's sidewalks and there's houses, and they actually bus people in from other towns so that they can get that trick-or-treating feel.
It's a great trick-or-treating town.
So I get neighbors and I get friends and I get family members all, home base at our house. And so then we'll do like chili, and the kids just love that. We go out pretty early, around 4 or 5 o'clock. And then by 6 o'clock, we're back eating dinner, and it's sort of just potluck, and everybody's hanging around. But then the kids like handing out treats, so they'll just hang out on the porch, and then by 8 o'clock, everybody's toast. It's a great Halloween.
Yeah, that's and I love that. But also, it's weird because for me, growing up, we wouldn't go trick or treating until it was at least dusky into the nighttime. But now I know because of like safety issues and stuff, a lot of kids are going trick or treating. They're either doing that trunk or treat thing,
Yeah.
or they're going trick or treating like right after school. But I think that the enjoyable thing, at least for me, is that like if the trick or treating is done by like 6 o'clock, then there's time to watch like a nice Halloween movie together as a family, or divide up the candy and do all that
Or you
kind of
turn
stuff.
on Home Alone because you're ready for Christmas.
No, that is midnight. Midnight is then when Christmas starts.
Now, obviously, because you said it, you were allowed to trick or treat. Is that correct?
I was, yes.
I was not.
I went trick or treating.
I had one location on Halloween, and that was the Jesus Book and Gift Store.
See, now growing up, we did both the Christian thing and the, secular thing. So we went trick or treating, but we also went to like the Harvest Fest at church where you wore costumes, but we didn't celebrate Halloween.
You're allowed to be Buzz Lightyear, but you're not allowed to be Jack Skellington.
Exactly. That's exactly right. So,
which sort of sets up where you're taking us for our comic culture moment.
Well, yeah. So for our comic culture moment, before we get into today's flick, we're talking about movies that lean a little more heavily into horror. And last week we did last week. Wow, listen to me thinking we're a weekly show. On our last episode, we did one of the Hellboy movies. A couple episodes ago, we did the New Mutants, and those were movies that fell into this horror genre. And so it got me thinking, like, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on what you think Christians should consume in regards to media. Now, as both of us are followers of Christ, we and both of us grew up probably in more conservative leaning households, went to conservative churches growing up and have, since kind of, gone through our own, dismantling and kind of reshaping of our faith and that kind of thing. So, how do you feel now, I guess, as a pastor, as a parent, on, what is okay or not okay? Is it all fine? Is it subjective to you individually? Are there things across the board that are like, this should be a no for everybody? Because I have some thoughts, but let me hear what you have to say
Yeah,
first.
and it's hard to kind of pick which hat I'm going to wear. There's the pastor hat, there's the dad hat, there's the comic hat, there's the Joey hat.
Yeah.
But I think there is a truth that threads the needle of all of those, and that is, what are you opening yourself up to based on what you can handle?
Mm.
And here's what I mean by that. Over the last 2 years, I've been listening to a podcast called Blurry Creatures. Highly recommend them. There's some great guys. They look at Bigfoot as the gateway drug into discussing things like the supernatural, but they do it from a biblical
All right, so
lens.
it's things like are ghosts real,
Yep,
aliens, the Jersey Devil, that kind of
all of it has
stuff.
been covered and really well.
Mm.
But they also talk about the demonic and possessions and exorcisms. Now, that makes some Christians very uncomfortable.
Right.
I'll admit it makes me uncomfortable. But what I've realized through listening to this content at the pace that I can handle is that this is real. And I think that needs to be the subtext for what I say next. And I want to pause right on that. I used to think that a lot of this stuff was just Hollywood hype. I used to think that it was just for show and just, people who have given their lives over to Satan, and therefore Christians should not consume that. I think there's a level of responsibility that we have, what we subject ourselves to, but I think if we're coming at it from the standpoint that we don't even believe this stuff is real, that's an issue. And so I think you have to figure out where you stand with that first. Do you believe in the supernatural? If so, how much? I'll push a little bit. If there's a Christian here who's saying, well, no, I don't believe in any of that. Well, then why do we believe in talking snakes, virgins who got pregnant, and seas that split? The supernatural is a part of our canon, right? Like, as followers of Jesus, there are things that we cannot explain. There's just some categories that we like. We like the idea of angels, but we don't like the idea of demons.
Right.
But they're all a part of the supernatural. So I think first step, you have to understand, is this real or not? Once you decide whether it is or not, let's say you decide, yes, it is real. How much can you control your mind to think on whatever is pure, whatever is true, whatever is lovely, like it talks about in the New Testament? If consuming this stuff actually becomes a hindrance in being able to do that, I wouldn't consume it. Some people really like horror movies, and they're like, yeah, it's entertaining to me because I can put it in a category where I know that it's real and it's not going to affect me. Not everybody can do that.
Mm.
And I think just having grace for yourself, but also for other Christians who can seemingly handle that, and not judging them, being like, well, you're just opening yourself up. Well, to some point, it's entertainment. You might not see it as such, but you might not be able to handle as much. So I think it's really just understanding yourself, and it's understanding, what is this? Is it real or is it not? And based on that answer, can I handle it or can I not? What do you think?
Well, if we're talking in regards to media that deals with the supernatural and the demonic, I've never had an issue with those things. You know, that's something that's never been something that made me afraid or something that made me uneasy or anxious. You know, so I read books about possessions. You know, The Exorcist is one of my favorite books. I watch movies that, you know, um, uh, Last Night with the Devil and things like that. They never have seemed to affect me negatively. Because again, I watch them and view them, you know, purely as entertainment. So I think that it does boil down to what is okay for you personally. Like what is it that you're convicted by? What is it that you can handle? You know, my wife is a very sensitive uh person. She's an empath, and she feels things very heavily. For
Yeah.
her, you know, she doesn't like scary things in general, but for her especially, anything having to do with the supernatural, with the devil, with demonic, with hell, you know, that stuff just unsettles her deeply. So she doesn't consume it. And I don't give her a hard time about it. I don't tell her that she should be okay with it or she shouldn't just because I am. Um, you know, that's her conviction. And she doesn't, you know, give me any problems because I don't have an issue with it.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, kind of like when we talked about, you know, separating the creator versus the creation, the artist, the art and the artist, you know, I think that there needs to be room for grace for people that are bothered by these things and are not bothered by these things. Now that's in regards to the supernatural types of things, but do you think that that same logic applies to other, you know, quote unquote offensive things in movies like violence or language or sex or you know, does that fall into the same category, you think, of like, you know, well, you know, leave it up to the individual. If they're not bothered by, you know, 20 F bombs, then that's fine. And if they are, then don't watch it.
It's such a nuanced conversation because now we're not talking about what you can personally handle. We're talking about what a Christian could or maybe even should consume based on some level. And this is where Christianity sort of gets into it, and it's confusing because we're not clear. It's like, well, you know, don't let anybody stumble, but you know, what bothers you isn't necessarily going to bother me, and what doesn't cause me to stumble might cause you to stumble. Yeah, but there's just some base level things that we shouldn't be doing. And I think that's where Christianity finds itself today. Okay, I'll throw the pastor hat on right now. We have tried to be cool and not put rules on things, and in the pursuit of that, we have lost who we are. Where some things are just not okay. And I'm not even going to go out there and tell you what those things are. Whatever just came to mind, you know, whatever God's spirit just brought up in your head, maybe that's where God's convicting you. But what's hard is when we try to take a society that is not following after God, that makes art that does not try to imitate the God image within us, and we try to say, well, that's okay for you, but it's not okay for me, or vice versa. Now it's like, well, you're talking apples and oranges. Right? Like it's sort of like trying to make the argument because you want to make the argument, not because the content really supports your argument. Does that make sense?
I mean, yes, it makes sense. But like, okay, so for me, this is a conversation that I've had with my dad. My dad was a pastor for a long time, almost my whole life, either part time or full time. And he always wondered why I was okay with watching things that had, you know, a lot of that stuff in it, that had a lot of violence in it, that had a lot of bad language in it, and that kind of thing. Because it's something that just never bothered me. For me, I never felt like convicted watching it. I never felt like it was hurting my relationship with God. I never felt like it was something that was keeping me from doing, you know, whatever it was I felt like I was called to be doing at the time. You know what I mean? So for me, it's something that you can say that like across the board there's some things that we shouldn't be consuming, but again, I think that that comes down to your your personal conviction or your personal struggles or something that you feel very strongly about, which is fine. And I'm not going to fault anybody for being like, look, I just can't, watch movies that have gun violence in it because it just deeply affects me. Then absolutely you shouldn't watch it. Like, I don't want to bring harm, and I would never say to you, well, you should get over it. Oh, and I would never recommend like, oh, you should watch, John Wick. I'm not going to do that to somebody that for whom I know that's a real issue for them. But at the same time, I think that there needs to be some respect on the other side that like don't tell me I'm necessarily doing something wrong because it doesn't bother you, because it doesn't bother me just because it bothers you. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and I think what is required in all of this is having a deep relationship with people that's built on trust and awareness so that you can even enter into that conversation. Because
Absolutely.
what you just described is anonymous shaming on the other side because of your own insecurity or your own conviction. That's not a place to then throw that out. That doesn't build unity. It doesn't build the body of Christ.
That's what we see all over social media right now too, though, is the anonymous, where you can hide behind a screen and you can anonymously say you're wrong or you're stupid or you're evil or you're bad for believing this, liking this, doing this, when there's no time, there's no objective to get to know the person as to why they think, do, like, believe like this. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. So I
So
think it requires trust. I think you need relationship. But what do you think, audience? Drop us a comment on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Let us know whether or not you think certain things are off limits, some things should just not be touched, or it's up to the individual.
also, what are you going to be for Halloween? Let us know.
I'd love to know that. You know what else I'd love?
To do a plot synopsis.
Yeah, baby. Today we are covering 2019's Brightburn. And boy, do I have a
Ooh.
synopsis for you.
And the whole gun family was involved in this.
They really were. And it's
Almost all of
great.
them. Sean, I think, is the only one that wasn't involved in this in some way, shape, or form.
Cue the misguided music.
Ooh.
Here we go. What if Superman landed in Kansas, but instead of truth, justice, and the American way, he chose lies, vengeance, and the homicidal way? Welcome to Brightburn. Brandon Breyer starts off as a nerdy, quiet farm kid until puberty hits. And by puberty, we mean your changing alien body. He discovers he can crush hands like soda cans, fly into windows like a demonic bird, and carve his initials into the world one corpse at a time. His parents try to ground him, but it turns out grounding doesn't really work when your kid can fly through barns. As characters disappear faster than DC's hope for the Snyderverse, we quickly learn that you can't really run, you can't really hide, and you definitely can't outfly the angry alien kid with laser eyes. With no one to save us and death imminent, who will we call when the Ghostbusters aren't around and Brandon's mom's name isn't Martha? Find out in 2019's Brightburn. It's not a bird, it's not a plane, it's your worst nightmare. Dun dun dun!
That is a great tagline for this movie.
It's not a bird, it's not a plane, it's your worst nightmare.
That should have been the tagline for this movie.
I say it all the
It's
time.
not a bird, it's not a plane. Yeah, that's good
Hire
stuff.
me.
And this movie stars Elizabeth Banks, David Denman, Jackson A. Dunn, and was directed by David Yarovesky. And since we mentioned it, it was produced by James Gunn.
Woo!
And written by, and I forget their first names, but it was like James Gunn's brother and his cousin, who are both Gunn.
Mr. Gunn and Mr. Gunn.
Mr. Gunn and Mr. Gunn, produced by Mr. Gunn. And I mean, honestly, if you watch this movie, this has James Gunn all over it.
All over it.
This gives you the James Gunn feels, and
It's the gun,
yeah.
the whole gun, and nothing but the gun.
And if you don't know any of the actors in it, now Jackson Dunn hasn't really gone on to do much that I was noteworthy, but Elizabeth Banks you would know from,
Of course.
the Power Rangers remake and the Hunger Games and TV bits all over the place. And David Denman, you would know from either The Office as Roy,
Roy.
or if you're watching season 2 of Peacemaker, he is Captain Triumph, who is the brother of Peacemaker. So
Fantastic. There's some
there you
good
go.
stuff. There's a lot of good stuff, and I'm going to let you go first because I'm magnanimous.
Oh well, just a sweetie pie, aren't you?
You're a piece of work.
The first thing that I'm gonna say I like is I really dig the costume.
Hmm.
Like that mask with the weird rope kind of hanging from it and the tattered red cape that was his space blanket.
It's terrifying.
I think it's super cool. It is. It's terrifying. Yeah, that's done really well. Now, this is definitely a, horror movie trying to be a comic book based movie.
Yeah.
But something that is unanimous for all horror movies, for me anyway, kids in horror movies freak me out. And Brandon Breyer is no exception. He does a great job as a
Yep.
creepy kid. You get a weird vibe. You can see how he might be likable, but also how he might be a homicidal maniac. In regards to comic book horror movies, you have your standard ones that things like Ghost Rider and Hellboy and the New Mutants. But I think that this does it right. This
Yeah.
is equal parts comic book and horror. It's genuinely got comic book beats we know, and it's genuinely got scares and gore and horrifying imagery. So I think it does a really, really good job with that.
What I liked about that was that the way I worded it was that it had commitment to the bit.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't pull any punches. It goes dark and it stays dark. It's not trying to
hmm
make you feel good. It's like, look, if you didn't know what you were getting into, tough noogies. But this is where we're going, and I loved it.
hmm I also think that part of the reason it worked really well was that it was a very small and I don't want to say lesser known cast, but it wasn't like huge stars. This is
No.
invariably going to get compared to Superman because it's basically what if Superman turned evil as a kid. And if you look at, a movie like Man of Steel that had Kevin Costner as Pa Kent and had Diane Lane as Ma Kent, these were, huge stars, big names, long careers. You had people in this movie who you would recognize from other stuff, but weren't, you would never probably call, Hollywood superstars. You know what I mean?
And I think that while that might have been budgetary, I think it aligned the character choices and the actor choices with the idea that this needs to be simple but effective. We're
hmm
going to give you a familiar story in an unsettling way. It's an approach that we've never done, but it's a character that you know and love. And the acting selection really worked with that, even from the standpoint of just developing the world.
hmm
I also have here, you probably have it too, but just the setting. Like, it wasn't like, all right, Metropolis. No, farmhouse. That's it. Like, you've got the school and everything, but like,
All you see is the farmhouse, the school, and the diner. That's
that's
really it.
it. You're
And that's
isolated
great.
and you feel like you're cut off. And that's a great horror movie move. But the acting choices and the actor selection really made that really solidified.
Absolutely. I think that it went light enough on the gore to be accessible, but heavy enough to be horror. Like you get that shard of glass in the eye
That was
in
something.
the diner. You got the uncle's jaw kind of falling off, and he's trying to hold it together. Moments like that. I think really was like, oh, they're really not messing around. But it wasn't so much that you saw it constantly and that you saw it aggressively. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It wasn't so much so that it became like a joke. It was just enough to make it uncomfortable.
Yeah. And it was rated R. So it wasn't like,
Yeah.
oh, we can't go there. No, they went there.
I think that there was enough humor in it with the uncle to make it there like it was sparingly used and it was
It had breathing room.
funny. It was yes, it was funny enough and it was fine and I liked that. It was just the right amount of R rating in it to make it what it was. It wasn't over the top. It wasn't something super excessive. Again, this is a James Gunn produced joint, so Michael Rooker has to be in it. And if you watch during the
Has to
end
be.
credits, you see him as the kind of YouTube conspiracy theorist. So that was fun. Always fun to see him. And I also like that he kind of references. Well, I like and dislike that he references other like monsters in this world. Like there was a sea creature that was kind of
Oh,
Aquaman
I
esque.
absolutely loved the entirety of that. That there's an evil Justice League.
Exactly, but the thing that is disappointing about it is that we're never going to get to see any of that develop.
We'll get to that, but I have them in both good and bad. The evil version
Exactly.
of the Justice League being teased, that's awesome. You didn't have to
Yeah.
do that, but that's
No, that was
great.
just a fun little thing right at the end. There was some great visuals. One of the visuals I think is really cool was the symbol that Brandon carves on everything. I really like the design of that. It's simple. It looks like it would be a, superhero slash villain logo.
Yeah,
It's very reminiscent of the bat symbol or Superman's S or Wonder Woman's W. Any of that kind of stuff. I think is very visually striking and looks like a really great calling card for a superhero. But also, it looks like the calling card that could be left by a serial killer.
totally.
And I think that it works both ways. And I think it was designed to do that.
It was immature enough that it worked for a kid, but it's also horrifying to be like, if you found that in, one of these other horror films, you wouldn't think it was out of place.
The last thing I have that really stood out to me was it was a really unique way of telling the story of, a family that was so desperate. You had this couple that was so desperate to have a child that was just not.
Freaking North.
Oh, what did I take your thing?
You literally took everything. Actually, there's
Oh,
one.
sorry.
But no, keep going. That's never happened though. I just had to point it out. We have
Yeah,
never like completely taken everything. We took everything, which means we were totally aligned on this.
yeah. You had this family, dealing with infertility and dealing with, just wanting to expand their family and can't. And so out of desperation, they find this child, they want to take him in,
They try to do the
and
right
you
thing.
see they try to do the right thing, and you see how grateful they are
Yep.
because this has been such a struggle for them. And then you see the breakdown of that family dynamic
Yep.
where you see the parents kind of stop aligning with each other, and you see the dad willing to go to these extreme measures and question things while the mom has this kind of blindness to anything going on until it's staring her in the face. And then there's this loving desperation versus this violent desperation of the dad. And even things with the aunt and the uncle, trying to be a support but being weird about it. And I think it's done so well, and what a unique way to kind of tell that kind of story.
Well, and then I took it a step further. The adoption anger, which is a very natural thing that many kids who have been adopted feel at certain ages towards their parents, towards their adoptive parents, towards
Hmm.
people in authority in general. Just this feeling of dislocation, not knowing who they are, wondering if they were wanted, all of that. Those are all very normal, and they put it in this plot. And it didn't feel out of place, but it also worked for the movie. It worked for the
Hmm.
setting. And as I'm watching it unfold, I'm sort of like, that's actually genius because they didn't have to manufacture the emotion, but they didn't have to circumvent the story through the back door. And it was really
Hmm.
cleverly done.
Yeah, I think that was done really, really well.
The only other thing I had was Rainn Wilson shows up in a cameo. He's in a photograph during the credits as the character
Yes,
Crimson Bolt. Which
from
was
Super.
from Super, which James Gunn also produced, which I just thought was cool. But otherwise, yeah, man, you covered everything I had.
Well, then you got any other? Because I got some other stuff.
I have no other. This was cut and dry.
Really?
Yep,
Okay. I got a couple of things.
go for it.
I lo- I thought it was unnecessary, but I liked some of the foreshadowing they had, like when the girl in the class like turns to him and is like, don't listen to them. Smart guys like you are gonna rule the planet one day. And it's like, yep, he sure is.
That wasn't other. That was stupid.
Well, again, it didn't hurt it, but it was, fine. Uh, I don't have this in bad, and but I couldn't put it in good, but I can save it for the end. Do you have feelings about whether or not this should have had a sequel?
Oh, I have feelings.
Okay, then I will wait on that.
Yep.
This is clearly Superman, who goes evil at puberty. And I
Right.
don't know if that was like, is this meant to be an Elseworlds thing? Or is this meant to be something totally different? And it was clearly on purpose. It was, instead of Clark Kent, it was Brandon Breyer. But you also still see, like, when he's drawing that symbol in his notebook, he's using the red and blue Superman colors. You know what I mean? It was a childless couple on a farm who find an alien ship and hide it in the barn and adopt the kid, and then puberty.
There was enough to sort of denote, like, oh, this is that. But if it was going to be the Elseworlds, then it had to have been Smallville. Then it had to have been, Jonathan and Martha.
Hmm.
Because it didn't go there, I didn't feel like it was trying to be a thing. I felt like it was his own. And I think it worked.
Okay. And the only other thing, this wasn't really a good, bad, or an other. It was just, I didn't, I've seen this a couple of times now, and I didn't notice the first time that the name is the name of the town or the name of the county.
Yeah.
I didn't notice that the first time, so I just wondered like where the name came from, and it was like, is
Ah,
that going to be like the super, the super being name he takes is Brightburn? Because that's a cool name. But then when the cop shows up at the house the first time, I saw Brightburn County, and then
yep.
at the end, when they're at the farm after like the plane has crashed, you see it on the ambulance. I was like, oh, that's where Brightburn. It's the name of the place he lives.
Yep.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of neat. But that's it from my other. Except for I think it should have had a sequel. But we're going to talk about it after a word from our sponsors.
We'll be back in a minute. At Breyer Candle Company, we know that sometimes a little light makes all the difference. Whether you're mourning the loss of your entire alien homeworld, or you just caused the loss of your current one, nothing says comfort like the warm glow of a hand-poured candle. Our exclusive farmhouse collection features scents such as burnt flesh, cornfield sorrow, and our newest release, Adoption Gone Wrong. Whether you're looking to set the mood, send condolences when you crush someone's hand, or you're floating ominously outside someone's bedroom window, these candles will kill. Literally. Each candle is sustainably sourced from the ashes of failed superhero franchises, with wicks hand-woven by orphans who definitely won't survive Act 2. Because at Breyer, we don't just light the room, we ignite generational trauma. Breyer Candle Company. When your origin story burns down, let ours burn brighter. Available exclusively at Hot Topic, right between the Jack Skellington socks and the discount Funko Pops.
That was very nice. Well done, subdued. I'm gonna give that a ledger. That was good. I liked that. That was nice.
That's right.
And surprisingly genuine sounding, but once again,
Not a real product. I have a fair bit of bad things, actually. I'll go first since I didn't have any good to share. You took them all.
yeah, you go. Maybe you'll knock out all my bad.
All right. I felt like the characters at times were thin. Outside of Brandon's mom, most of the characters are horror movie cannon fodder. You just know they're going to die. So there's no explanation. There's no backstory, no development. It's like, as
Hmm.
soon as you come on the screen, I know you're not going to make it into Act 2. I just know it.
You knew that, like, Erica, the mom who works at the diner, you knew
Oh,
she was
yeah.
gone. You knew at least the uncle was gone. You
Anybody
knew
who
Dad
raises
probably
a
wasn't gonna
hand
make it.
against Brandon is not going to survive. There was some pacing issues with it, too. I felt like it took too long for Brandon to fully go rogue, and then everything just happened super fast. So it wasn't paced very well.
I disagree. I feel like it happened pretty quick.
Ah. No.
Okay, I disagree. I feel like it went pretty quick because I mean this movie is only about an hour and a half, and I think that it would have been very easy to stretch this out into like, oh my god, get to the killing or the superpowers already.
Get to the thing, would you?
And in fact, that's one of my negatives is, Brandon kind of goes rogue with no real buildup as to why. So I could have even used a little more, stretching that out to be like, was he, you saw maybe a little bit of bullying, but then he never does anything to the bullies. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like nothing ever happens to them. So it just felt like it was this weird jump to being evil.
Well, and I think that's more of what I mean. It's not that like yes, it was predictable. Yes, you could almost call shot for shot, beat for beat what was gonna happen, particularly if you know a superhero movie, if you know a villain arc, if you're familiar with horror. Sure, it's right there. But I would have liked a little bit more of the why. And it was just a lot of what.
What did he say?
This gets us to wasted world building. The evil Justice League is dropped in there and it's never explored. It totally should have been. Now, the director confirmed that within the film credits, they were trying to give that Aquaman, that half man, half sea creature. He's terrorizing the seas. You've got Rainn Wilson's Frank Darbo in there from Super. Even Caitlin, they had this idea where there was going to be an alternate ending, and with her hand, it was going to be a robotic hand, and so she would become Cyborg. It was really cool.
That's cool.
And then literally a year later, Gunn just shot the idea down when they asked, like, hey, where's the sequel? He's like, yeah, it's not going to happen. There's rights issues with H Collective. So I just think that was such a missed opportunity.
I agree. There should have been a sequel. This could have been a whole like horror universe, evil Justice League, evil Avengers. I think could have been really, really cool. And
Yeah.
they really just dropped the ball. And I mean, I understand that, there's, issues with rights and,
Sure.
now, Gunn is doing, the DCU and everybody's moved on to other stuff, but it's just
Well, and
a
that's
shame
what he
that
was.
this was.
That's what he was saying too. Like, he didn't pick up with any of this or even pursue it because by this point he had become the head of DC, and he was also working on Guardians 3. So even if they did greenlight it, he had no ability.
Yeah, he had the Guardians, he had the Suicide Squad, he had all of DC now under his belt, and so he had a lot going on, and I get that, but it's just a shame that it didn't come to light.
Come back, bro. There is zero moral wrestling here. Like, nobody debates or wrestles with what is happening. They're just sort of screaming and dying. It's like nobody pauses and is like, wait a second. Is this good?
Are we good?
Should we not just talk about this for a second? It's literally just scene to scene to scene, thing to thing to thing. But there's no why. It's all just what?
No, I'd agree with that.
One petty thing. Why does Tori only remember that the ship can harm Brandon at the end? Like, wouldn't you have that in your back pocket?
Well, again, so I think that the reason she doesn't remember it to the end is that she put it out of her mind because when it happened, she was in super denial, and Brandon also hadn't done anything super evil yet at that point. And even up until the very end, she was in so much denial that he was, it wasn't until he goes on the hunting trip with his dad and she like finds the symbol in the notebook that she finally like accepts the fact that like, oh my God, he's behind, all these horrible things that have been happening.
Yeah.
So I think that that's also part of it too. Why would she think of, here's the only thing that could potentially be a weapon against my son when she was so in denial about him doing anything wrong?
Yeah. All right.
So
I'll give
that's
you that.
probably why.
Here's my last thing, and this is my biggest thing.
Okay.
This movie lacks wit. And here's what I mean by that. You are crossbreeding superhero tropes with horror staples. And on paper, that is a fantastic idea. It is a pitch that practically sells itself. You take the world's most recognizable hero archetype, this farm boy who discovers he's got alien powers, and you mash it with a slow burn creep of a possession / slasher flick, essentially. That should be dripping with irony. It should be dripping with subversion. There's clever nods to both genres. Instead, I felt like this just played it too straight. Rather than poking fun at the like it wanted to take itself a little too seriously. You could have poked at some superhero cliches. You could have poked at with great power comes great responsibility. There was no speeches, but you also didn't lean into the dark absurdity of comic tropes or horror tropes or, the jump scares, final destination deaths. Like, it sort of just joylessly trudges on.
It's not a piece of junk. We made it.
And for me, that doesn't really put it in a place. Now, I get that you can say, that's what makes it stand alone. That's what gives it its own identity. Yeah, but I sort of feel like you need one or the other as a touchstone to get you into the world a little bit more than just, this is who we are, this is what it is, we're going to steal these things, but it's just this. And I felt like it didn't enjoy itself. It was just too serious.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the camp that I think that that's what kind of sets it apart. It would have been really easy to do kind of a, oh, look at what we're doing. We're Superman if he's a bad guy, and also here's blood and gore. James Gunn kind of got his start in the trauma films, which were movies like Tromeo and Juliet, the Toxic Avenger, Nuke 'Em High, that kind of stuff, where it was so
Right.
over the top horror and gore and just this almost flirting with exploitation. And I think it would have been really easy for him to kind of go that route with this, and I'm kind of glad that they put some handcuffs on themselves a little bit to hold themselves back a little, and treated it with a little more seriousness. For me, that was
Yeah.
that's for me, because it would
I
have
see
been
what
too
you're
easy
saying.
to go full Tromaville with it.
Yeah, and I don't think it needed to do that. I just felt like the audience never got a wink and a nod. We never got a sly inversion. There was never a clever aha moment. And I get that, like, there's a spectrum of how you can do that. There's end game level of, like, paying off a bunch of stuff. And then there's just, like, hey, that was carefully crafted, and blink and you miss it. And I just felt like it didn't even bother trying to do that.
I feel that.
That's the end of mine. What do you got?
Why? And this is a Superman question too, I guess, but why did they keep the ship? Like, if the idea is
In
that,
case
like,
he's
we
got
want
to
to
go
treat him
back.
as normal, we never want him to, feel, we don't want him to know he's an alien. Like, why do you keep it and hide it and just, like, melt it down, sell it as, like, a movie prop, smash it up, something.
It's a 30-day return policy. You got to keep the original packaging.
It's time to stop, okay? No more.
Here's where I think that the pacing didn't work.
Okay.
Now, I like that they moved things quickly, but they jumped a little too fast in certain parts. One of those parts is when Brandon gets frustrated with the lawnmower and he throws it across the field. How does he immediately jump from, oh my God, I have super strength, to let me stick my hand in the blades and see if I'm also invulnerable? Super strength doesn't mean that you're invulnerable. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that was just a weird, like, I guess you could look at that as, like, that's a kid way of thinking, like, oh, I've read comic books or seen superhero stuff, and that must mean I can do this thing. But, like, one does not necessarily, because that's the only power he discovered at that point. So it doesn't necessarily mean that your fingers aren't going to get chopped off if you stick your hand in the blade there. So that just felt a little weird.
Right.
I get that they live in rural America and they live on a farm, but wouldn't you ask before it? Listen, if you were to give my son a birthday gift and you wanted to give him a rifle, wouldn't you check with me first and be like, listen, I want to get him this for his birthday. Is that cool with you guys?
Yeah.
Yeah, right? instead of just springing it, that seemed like a weird choice. And it's like, well, you kind of deserved what was coming for you then, because that was a bad choice. This is a horror movie trope. Somebody is always in denial. This time it was mom, but somebody is always in denial that what's clearly happening is not happening, and that clearly who's responsible couldn't possibly be responsible. And it's like, okay, it's a gripe I have with many horror movies where I'm asking the characters, have you never watched a movie before? Like, there are things you don't do. There are rules. And if we watch, if you look at movies like Scream, they lay out the rules for you. There are things you don't do, and you're doing them.
Well, and
Why are you doing them?
that's where you could have taken a moment for wit. That's where you could have stepped in and been like, having the one character to look around and be like, are we sure? Like, he could have been the comic relief for all I care.
That's what they did with, if you ever saw Cabin in the Woods, that's what they did in that with the guy who was a stoner when he's like, all right, we should all split up to look around the house. What? Are you serious? Why would we do that? That's a terrible plan.
Exactly.
And it's that idea. So, yeah, so in that respect, I can see why you would want that character.
I'm with you.
So, yeah, that makes sense. Why was it inappropriate for
the
him
entire
to show
bad
up?
section for you is called Why.
Why? Yeah, it's just things I questioned. Well, actually, my last two things are both why.
Of course they are.
Why is it inappropriate to show up at his aunt's house?
It's inappropriate, Chris.
I just don't understand why. Like, at that point, the only bad thing that anybody knew that he did was, break Caitlin's hand. So it's like, okay, so he did it. He did a bad thing, but it was like, it's really inappropriate for you to show up here late at night. I get that she's also his teacher, but also it's like, that's your nephew. Like, why is that weird for him to show up there? Like, that felt like a weird thing. Like, you should
why?
seem more concerned about it. Exactly, why? And the last thing, for what reason would a bullet work?
For what reason? Because science.
I guess. And again, it's
He's out of options.
It's again one of those horror tropes where you just shot him in the head and
Ping.
watched it like bounce off. Not only bounce off, but do that where like spark when it like hits metal or something. And your first instinct when you realize, oh, that didn't work, is to reload. Like,
let's try that again.
The second one would work. That was something that was always, if you've I'm sure you've seen the original Universal Mummy.
Just shooting at the mummy.
When I forget which guy it is. When the mummy is walking after him and the guy is shooting. If after the first, I'll even give you two. If after the first two bullets didn't work, it's time to either just run or think of something else, because this is clearly not working. And so that happens a lot where it's like, shooting him is not working. Pick something new.
Let's try something else.
Yeah. But that's it on my bad. It wasn't a lot of bad. It was just some nitpicky questions.
Chris just wanted to know why.
I need reasons. For
Speaking
things.
of which, that sets up my spiritual content perfectly. So I'll go first. What really struck me about Brightburn is that Brandon figures out what he is, but he never wrestles with why he is. The movie makes a huge deal.
For what reason?
For what reason? The movie makes a huge deal about him discovering his powers. He can fly. He's invincible. He's got those creepy laser eyes. But once he realizes he's different, his whole identity collapses inward. His gifts aren't for others. They're only for himself. And so honestly, that hits a little close to home, because how often do we as followers of Jesus settle for the what without pressing into the why? Like, we can know our talents, we can know our personality types, even our spiritual gifts, but if we don't connect that identity to God's mission, then it just curdles into self-service. And we live for ourselves instead of living as sent people on a mission. And so we end up building our platforms, we build our empires, we become about the thing we are instead of the reason we are here. And Jesus actually warns against this in Matthew 7, where people come to him and they're like, well, didn't we do miracles in your name? Didn't we prophesy? Didn't we exercise gifts? And he goes, I never knew you. You want to talk about something haunting? That verse has haunted me my entire life. The idea that you can use gifts disconnected from the one who gave them to you. And Brandon is a extreme horror version of that. Somebody who embraces power, but then rejects purpose. And yet the gospel flips that. In Jesus, our identity is always tethered to mission. It is always tethered to purpose. We are not just gifted, we are called. There's a reason for what we do. And if we miss that calling, not only do the gifts go to waste, but they can actually destroy us and the people around us.
Oh, that was really good stuff, man.
That's why.
That's why. That is for the reason. That is the reason for which.
That is, this episode is called For the Reason.
Be Brandon, Brightburn, and Breezens.
Breezens.
All right, well, Breezens, just to go with the alliteration there. Mine is a little different, but kind of a little loosely connected there, I think. Brandon's parents, the mom more so. So let's focus on mom. Just refused to see any wrong in Brandon. Like, she refused to notice the signs.
Yeah.
She refused to believe people who were telling her, listen, something could be seriously wrong here. Everything was defensible until it was too late. By the time she opened her eyes, it was, the end was already here. And all that was blind faith. That was just blindly believing in something that you took as gospel without looking at the evidence that was in front of you as to is what I'm thinking about this really true? And I think that when we blindly follow, there's no intellectual basis for that. It inhibits our spiritual growth when we just blindly follow anything. But even if we blindly follow Jesus and not ask any questions, not put our faith to the test. We're told to put our faith to the test. And Jesus even gave proof to Thomas. He gave proof to Saul that he was who he said he was. God also did that. He gave proof and evidence when, some of the greatest figures in the Bible questioned him and asked him to, prove himself. And I'm not saying that God should always have to do that, but I think that it's our responsibility to ask the hard questions. We need to do the work and look at the evidence, look at God's character, look at how history is. And we see this, today in our social and political spectrum of, people attaching themselves to figures that they just blindly follow and believe that everything they say is gospel. And this is on both sides. I'm not even choosing a side here, but on both sides, people will look at their person or their people and be like, well, obviously blank is fact because so-and-so said it. Okay, it might be, but this is where you need to do the research. Look at all angles of this thing. Don't just blindly believe something. Do the intellectual work and understand it for yourself, because that's the only way that you're going to be impactful and that it's truly going to be impactful for you is if you put the work and effort in to be able to understand, is this true? Is this worth believing? Is this worth putting my stock into? Because if you don't, and it's not the thing to believe in, kind of like what happened with, the mom and Brandon, it could end up being too late by the time you realize this was not the way to do it. So
I love it.
Be careful about blindly putting your faith in things.
Be careful, little heart, what you believe. You know that song?
I don't know that one, and I'm kind of glad.
It goes through.
No.
It's like an old Sunday school song. Be careful, little tongue, what you say. Be careful, little eyes, what you see. Be careful, little ears, what you hear.
Oh, I do know that,
You
actually.
want to sing it with me?
No, absolutely, I do not.
No. You want to rate this?
I do want to do that. Listen, this has James Gunn attached to it, as well as other members of his family, which to me makes it gold. I think this is a fun movie. Does a great job. It's got rewatchability. This is a Keaton for me. Look, it's got a couple of issues, but not, that doesn't make it perfect. But for me, it's so easy to enjoy. So Keaton all day.
Nice.
What about you? What do you got?
I gave it a Clooney. Trick or Treat. No, I gave it a Keaton.
Yeah, you did.
I agree. Great idea. Effects are good. Solid setup. There's some issues, but I would watch this yearly. Keaton all the way.
Yeah, absolutely. This is just a fun movie, and it's a good, it's a fun way to transition into the Halloween season, especially as a geek. And it kind of would be fun to, like, in September watch James Gunn's Superman, and then in October watch James Gunn's Brightburn.
There you go. But audience, let us know what you thought of Brightburn. Leave us a comment on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. You can follow us those places, and you can stream this wherever you get podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, right here on good old YouTube. But thank you so much. Chris, take us out.
I will take us out. Have a great Halloween season, everybody, and we will see you towards the end of the month for another spooky flick. But until then, remember, kids, take the world. Bye.
Take the world, but give me Jesus. That's another Sunday school song.
That one I know. That's an old hymn.